Hello, my name is Steve Russell. It is April 6th, 2025, and we are located at the Randell Research Center in Bokeelia, Florida, which is on Pine Island. The Randell Research Center is a program of the Florida Museum of Natural History. Today I will be recording a tour being given by Kevin Lawler, who is a tour guide here at Randell. The tour will cover in part the Calusa people who lived and thrived here where we are standing for many hundreds of years.
My name's Kevin, and I'm going to be giving you a tour of this place. I'm going to start with an archaeological anecdote, personal anecdote. I moved to Southwest Florida, Lee County in March of 1990, so that's 35 years ago. And I moved here to be the science reporter for the local newspaper, the News Press. And in 1992, in April, I got a phone call from Chuck Blanchard. He's an archaeologist, and he said that University of Florida was going to be having an event out here at Pineland called Year of the Indian 2. The original Year of the Indian had been in 1989, and this would be the same kind of thing. PhDs and grad students and undergraduate students and trained volunteers come out, and they open up a bunch of pits, and they do really serious archaeology. And Blanchard said that for the first Year of the Indian, the News Press, my newspaper, sent out a reporter and a photographer. They spent an hour and a half out here talking to folks, taking photographs, and went back and wrote a story. And Blanchard said, "Do you want to do that this time?" And I said, "I got a better idea. Train me to be a volunteer. I'll get down in a pit and I'll work as an archaeologist and I'll write from that point of view." He said, "Great idea." My editor said, "Great idea." So I did that. They trained me up and they put me in a pit. And the pit was 2 meters by 3 meters, or 6 square meters. And they divided into 3 1-meter pits with a string going down long ways and then 2 strings going this way. They put me in one of the middle pits, and next to me in the middle pit was a man named Mitchell Hope. And this guy was one of these really brilliant amateurs, knew as much about archaeology as any PhD, right? So we're working away, and I really quickly came to understand that archaeology is not what you see in Indiana Jones movies. We're not looking for the Holy Grail. We're not looking for the Lost Ark of the Covenant. We're looking for little things, small things, anything of archaeological importance. Okay? And you don't get a bullwhip, you don't get a 45 caliber pistol, you get a garden trowel and a dustpan, and you scrape away at what you call the overburden, the stuff that's there. And that can be muck, can be mud, it can be sand. For us, it is packed shell. It's like digging out in that parking lot, right? So, and what you're doing is you're scraping away and you're looking for, artifacts or pieces of broken pottery, anything that might tell us something about the people who lived here. So I'm scraping away, and about the 4th day, I get out of the pit and I'm getting a drink of water, and I'm looking over there, and there's Mitchell Hope, and he's on his knees in his pit, and this is the 4th day, and we're like this deep. Yeah, hard work. He's looking across the line into my pit. And I'm thinking, what is he doing? Why is he looking? And so I'm watching him, and he's looking over, and he's kind of looking around. And finally, he reaches over and starts pushing little dirt and shells away. And he starts wiggling something, and he pulls up this absolutely beautiful stone cutting tool. I mean, it was perfect. This is a 1,500-year-old artifact. It looked like a flint knapper had just made it. And he holds this thing up and says, "Look at here." And everybody said, "Way to go, Mitch." And the photographer for the newspaper going, click, 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 take a picture of him. This is a picture of Mitch and stone cutting tool that he found in my pit. And I said,
"That's so cool. That's cool." Yep.
I wish the picture could show how absolutely beautiful that thing is. Did you get to see it? And so I'm standing there, and Mitch has got my thing up in the air, and I say, "Mitch, that was in my pit. I should have found that."
Stay in your lane.
And yes, exactly. And Mitch says, and here's the punchline right here. Mitch says, "Son, in archaeology, it's not what you find, it's what you find out." You could find this very same thing in a hayfield in southwest Missouri. You take it to an archaeologist and you say, hey, why don't you study this? You say, no, take it home, put it in a frame. We can't do anything with it. There's no context. We don't know where this came from. Okay? Some Washoe Indian in Oregon could have made this and dropped it, and some kid in 1900 found it out there in Oregon, and he sent it to his brother or his cousin or his uncle in Chicago, and he sent it to a guy in Missouri who dropped it in a hayfield. But if you find something in context, you find something where the people left it, and it tells you something about the people, that's when you're doing archaeology. Okay? And that's what we do out here at the Randell Research Center. So we're going to walk around and talk about some of the things we've been finding and finding out about the Calusa Indians. So if you follow me, go this way. Okay, everything we know about the Calusa comes from two sources. You got the historical record and you got the archaeological record. The historical record begins in the 16th century when the Spanish got here. The archaeological record begins in 1895 when a man from the Smithsonian named Cushing came here, and he went also down to Key Marco, down in the 10,000 Islands. The archaeological record tells us that the first people settled here at about 50 AD. The Calusa got here about 500 AD. We don't know who the Calusa were or where they came from. Right? They might have been the people who were here at 50, and they simply were the same people, and the Spanish got here and they said, well, who are you? And we're the Calusa, the same people. They might have been people who paddled down the coast or up the coast or came over from the mainland just looking for a place to live, and they got here and they said, hey, this is nice, and they killed all these people or ran them off or said, can we marry in with you? Okay. But in any case, the Calusa, as we know the Calusa, were here at 500 AD. At about 800 AD, they started building mounds out of shell. These people have been here for a long time, and 750 years, and they've been eating a lot of mollusks. There's a lot of shell lying around, so they started stacking them up to build mounds. And by the time the Spanish got here, you had a city.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is from Cushing's drawings. Okay, so you see the little arrow down in the corner?
Yep.
Okay, that points north, which is roughly that way. Okay, now that mound used to stretch 55 yards farther out that way and 85 yards going this way. Most of it's gone.
Road bays, probably.
Road bays, filling wetlands, all of that, okay? You see these features that look like Twinkies?
Yep.
Little Twinkie features?
Yep.
All right, that is where that house is. This mound is 30 feet tall. There used to be a 30-foot tall mound there where that house is, right? This photo, or this picture, shows the cacique. The head Calusa was called the cacique. He is sitting on that mound, and right over here is that mound, all made of shell. That mound would have been as tall as that house is and as wide as that house is, and it would have stretched 100 yards, the size of a football field. Okay, that's a lot of shells stacking up. And then next to it is another Twinkie-looking mound, okay, same size. And then all these other smaller mounds here, all made of shell. Okay, some of them are taller than others. This one here is this little tiny mound next to the big trapezoid mound.
Yep.
And it was probably lower. But anyhow, you had all these mounds made of shell. And then these round mounds, those are made of sand. Those are the burial mounds. They were both about an acre and a half at the base, and they were 30 feet tall, and they sat in big man-made lakes. The Calusa dug up all this sand and stacked it up to make burial mounds. Okay, it's a lot easier to bury somebody in sand than it is to bury them in shell. This mound right here is called Smith Mound, and it's on our property. This other mound is Adams Mound. It's not on our property, it's over that way, and there's actually a house built on what used to be the burial mound, which is kind of scary to me. See this thing looks like a kidney? Okay, that's another man-made wet lake. It's a water feature. And these square features here, okay, we call those water courts. Those are also man-made water features. Anybody want to guess what those square things are for? Take a shot. See, that's a great guess because just recently, do you know where Mound Key is down in Estero Bay? Okay, that was the Calusa capital. Just recently, the University of Florida, Bill Marquardt, and people from the University of Georgia, Victor Thompson, determined, okay, for years they've been seeing this, this mound's been out there and they've been studying it, but they've noticed these features coming out from the mounds, like walls under the water, okay? And they finally decided, let's just look into these, go out there a bunch of low tides and figure it out. And they determined that these two big places that were enclosed by these shell walls, they were just about the size of a football field each. Those were fish pens. And what the Calusa would do would be get out in the water with the big mullet runs and chase the mullet in there and then close the gate. And if it's too windy to go out fishing, they'd throw a cast net and you got your mullet right there. We don't think that they would have done that here because you couldn't get the mullet up this little, the only way to get up there is this little stream right here, okay? So, but it's possible, and this is my own idea, it's possible that the Calusa could have gone out there. They had a whole lot of shells, right? Shellfish. They could go out there on a nice day and pick up oysters and clams and whelks and conchs and bring them back and put them in here. Yep. And then if it's a lousy day, they can just go here to pick them up.
Like holding pens.
Like holding pens for these things, okay? But we don't know for sure. But what we are pretty sure of, these are canoe parking lots. All right? The Calusa lived and died by the canoe, right? And they didn't want to, right, out here, this is all Pine Island Sound out here. You don't want to be out there fishing all day. Come home, bring your gear in, bring your catch in, and just leave your canoe out there because the tide comes in or something, wind blows away or, some jerk kid living on a different island comes and steals your canoe, all right? So you park it in here. This long feature down the middle of the whole thing, okay, that is the Grand Canal, a 2.5-mile canal that the Calusa dug all the way across the island from right here over to Matlacha Pass. And we'll get to that later. We'll reach a point where I'll ask you if you want to talk about that, and if you do, we will. If you don't, we'll just, move on because it takes a little while to discuss it. Anyway, so this is what the people of what we call Pineland lived at the time that the Spanish got here. The Calusa called this place Tampa. This is the original Tampa. If you look at old maps, 16th, 17th century maps, clearly marked Tampa. And Charlotte Harbor, you just see it has a B period de Tampa. The B stands for Bahia, Bay of Tampa, Tampa Bay. This is Tampa Bay out there. This is Tampa right here. But then they got confused and they moved Tampa Bay up there. This is the second most important city in the Calusa domain. The capital is down at Mound Key. Okay? And the Calusa called that place Kalos. Now, a lot of indigenous people in North America call themselves the people of the forest or the people of the river, or the Comanches just call themselves the people. Kalos in the Calusa language means fierce people. Okay, the Calusa called themselves, they didn't call themselves the people of the bay. Yeah, we're the fierce people because they were the fierce people. They dominated all of South Florida. The Calusa domain stretched from right across Charlotte Harbor, where Cape Hayes is, right? There's a big complex there called Big Mound Key. Stretched from there down through here all the way to the 10,000 Islands. It's like 70 miles, and it's all on the estuary. Every one of the 50 to 60 settlements was on an estuary. Okay? So it's not a very big area. And the Calusa had 20,000 people, probably as a population. 500 to 1,000 lived here, but 20,000 people total. With that population in that area, they dominated all of South Florida. That means they demanded tribute from all these other people, from the Ice Indians up in Cape Canaveral, all the way down through the Hobe and the Tequesta, and the Miami Indians in the middle of the state, down through the Keys, where the Gurungumbi lived. All these people had to pay tribute to the Calusa, all right? And they don't want to be like talking down to you, but gotta make sure we all know the difference between trade and tribute. Trade, I give you something, you give me something back. Tribute, you give me something, I don't give you anything. I just won't burn your village down and kill you. But at the same time, if you paying us tribute, if, say, the Mayaca Indians from farther north come down and attack the Ayas Indians, then the Calusa will go over and fight them. Okay? So they're protecting them as well as collecting tribute. This is the state of events when the Spanish got here in 1513. And the head Spaniard of that group was Juan Ponce de Leon. So he shows up, and the Calusa didn't really welcome him too well. They attacked him. Okay? One day, warriors in 20 canoes attacked the ships, and a handful of Calusa were killed, and one Spaniard was killed. But then the next day, Calusa in 80 canoes showed up and attacked him. Right? And these were the Spanish called them, well, like war canoes. They were shielded canoes. Okay, they had shields built into them. So the Calusa attacked. They had this all-day fight, and nobody got hurt. The reason for that is the historians say the Calusa realized that, okay, the Calusa are the baddest guys around. They dominated everybody, so they're paddling out there. We're going to kick these guys on out. But then all these big noises start going off, and your guy next to you gets a big bloody hole in his chest because they got guns. And they also got crossbows, which shoot farther than the Calusa bows. So the Calusa stayed back on this particular fight. But the point is, and this is a very important point, the Calusa hated the Spanish before the Spanish ever even got here. And why is that? Because of Columbus. All right? Columbus comes to the New World where people have been living for like 20,000 years, comes to the New World, sets up camp at what he called Hispaniola, which is now the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And he made two big discoveries. One, the people who live there, the Taino, don't have any weapons. They don't have an army. They are simply farmers and fishermen. They didn't fight anybody. They all got along. They also had gold in the hills. Okay. Columbus says, this is great for me, and so he enslaves the whole population. Everybody over the age of 14 became a slave, and most of them he put to work in the mines, and he instituted a gold quota by which every 3 months, every person working in the gold mines had to produce for the Spanish a certain amount of gold. And it wasn't very much, like 2 to 3 ounces, but if you didn't bring it in, let's say you're a 14-year-old boy or a girl, or a 70-year-old man or a woman, you didn't bring the gold in, the Spanish chopped your hands off. Okay? If you bled to death, that's okay. That serves as a lesson to everybody else. Columbus also started sex slavery, buying and selling women and girls to each other. And torture and murder and rape just became kind of entertainment for the Spanish. That's what they did. Then in 1511, the Spanish moved over to Cuba, and the atrocities they committed over there were just horrendous. And I used to rattle off a few of them, but it just, I got tired of doing it and a lot of people said, I don't want to hear that. So anyway, important point is, this is not revisionist history. This is not a bunch of modern history professors saying, oh, let's make up some stuff to make us feel bad about being, Europeans. This was all written down by a priest who was there, a Catholic priest named Bartolome de las Casas. So if you want to read about what they did, look up Bartolome de las Casas. So anyway, the point is, some of these Taino got tired of the treatment, and so they left Cuba, paddled across the Florida Straits to Florida, ended up with the Calusa and said, if these guys show up here, these white guys in these big ships, don't let them in. They will mess up your country. And so that's why the Calusa attacked them. So they have these two fights with Juan Ponce de Leon. He leaves. 4 years later, a man named Cordoba, another conquistador, shows up, and the Calusa attack him. 4 years after that, Juan Ponce comes back to Florida. He's got a contract from the King of Spain to be the governor of Florida. And so he's going to settle this place. And the historian, 16th century Spanish historian Oviedo tells us that he brought 200 people, 50 horses, beef cattle, pigs and goats, geese and chickens, and a whole bunch of seeds. They're going to be a farming community. They're going to make Florida this nice big farming colony. Right? So, the problem with that is, according to Oviedo, the Calusa are not like the Taino. The Calusa have a standing army. The Taino didn't. Right? And he also says about the Calusa, they are very harsh and very savage, and warlike and ferocious and indomitable, and unaccustomed to quietude. These are not people who are going to just sit down and quietly take this from these people. He also said, and this is really important, they are unaccustomed to abandoning their liberty to the discretion and foreign will of other men. So you got Juan Ponce, he's building his fort, building houses, maybe even starting to plant seeds, and here come the Calusa. They're not going to let these guys stay. Okay? And they completely overwhelmed the Spanish. Now remember, that last fight they had, the Calusa stayed out of range, so they wouldn't get hurt. My guess is that when they were fighting them back then, maybe they're saying, if we just make a show that we're not going to let them in, they'll go away and they won't come back. But this time they get here and they're going to stay. They're building a place. So Calusa said, we got to stop this. And the first fight, you had 80 canoes. I don't know how many people that would be. Maybe, a couple hundred, maybe 300, maybe 400. This would have been the whole Calusa army, I'm betting. Okay. The Calusa population was about 20,000. We don't know how big the army was. Let's say the army was 10% of their population. That's 2,000 people, right? Or if it was 5%, that's 1,000 people. You got 200 Spaniards, and not all of them are soldiers. You got carpenters, you got farmers, you got blacksmiths, and I don't know, Oviedo doesn't say if there's any women, but you gotta have women if you gotta have a colony, right? So how many people, how many soldiers did they have? Half of them, maybe 100? So let's say you got 1,000 Calusa and 100 soldiers. Who's going to win that one? These guys got, firearms. Does anybody remember the band from the 60s called The Doors? Yeah. Remember them? Okay. You remember the song 5 to 1? It was on their, I think, their third album. There's a line in there that says, they've got the guns, but we've got the numbers. We're going to win. Yeah, we're taking over. Come on. And so they did. All right. The Calusa just roared in on them and just pounded them. And the Spanish historian Lopez de Gomera says that the Calusa killed plenty of Spanish. We don't know how many that is, but plenty, all right? And then Oviedo, the historian, says the Spanish killed twice as many Calusa. So the Calusa were taking it. They were getting killed, suffering casualties, but they weren't going to quit. They got to get these guys out of here. One Calusa actually shot Juan Ponce de Leon with an arrow, right? And the Spanish said, we got to go. We got to get out of here. They got back in their ships. They went back to Cuba, and that's where Juan Ponce's wound became infected, and he died. The Calusa, our Calusa, some of the people who lived here at Tampa, killed Juan Ponce de Leon. That, to me, is an important historical fact. Yes, sir?
Is this where the battle happened?
We don't know. We're thinking it's maybe closer to the mouth of the river, because that'd be, you set up your place on a river. Lots of cities are on rivers, and because you got access to the inland, but we just really don't know. That's one of the problems, right? So after this, the Spanish don't come back to Calusa territory for 45 years. 3 other expeditions left Cuba and traveled up north of Tampa Bay, the other Tampa Bay, but they didn't come here. Because these guys, this Calusa, fierce people. This particular image is the same setting as that one, except that one is looking down from the top of that mound. This is us looking up at that mound from what is the canal, all righty? So, so far everything we've been talking about concerning the Calusa is just purely academic stuff, okay? The Calusa got here in such and such a year. They built a city. They killed Juan Ponce de Leon. Nothing but the facts. But what about the Calusa themselves? What were they like? And I asked that because, when I first started working out here, I thought, well, yeah, the Calusa are pretty neat. They fish and I fish, they love the water and I like the water and everything. But I always had this feeling that there was something that just had no connection with me. They didn't have any of the same values that I have in my, European background and all that. After working here for a while, started realizing the Calusa were like us a whole lot. We have a whole lot in common with them. First of all, for example, they love music. The Spanish talk about they love to sing, they love to dance. When the Spanish did come back 45 years after they killed Juan Ponce de Leon, the Spanish brought European musical instruments. And the Calusa loved it. They played songs, and every time they got done with a song, the Calusa would say, play another one, all right? So they love music. Well, so do we, right? Everybody likes music, whether it's, it can be classical or rock or, country or rap or whatever, Zydeco. We like music, just like they did, okay? They also were great artists. They loved art. They were expert carvers. They carved wood, they carved deer bone. We have found birds. We have found, we used to have an animal called the red wolf here. We found carved red wolves. We've caught, our logo right there, okay? That's this. We found this during Year of the Indian too. It's obviously a wading bird of some sort. Okay? But what's kind of neat about this is a deer bone, and it wasn't this big. It's about this big. Okay, so you don't have somebody just carving away like this. You got some teeny tiny little deer bone, and this person is just meticulous, maybe with a shark's tooth, meticulously carving this thing. And we think it was some kind of a pin, maybe a hairpin or something, but that's just really neat. Also during Year of the Indian too, we found what would be the top part of a wading bird's head. We didn't find the bottom part, but we found the top part, and it had holes evenly spaced, so probably a hinge to put the bottom part on. And what did they do with that? Well, they could have made just like a puppet and go around to the kids going, hey kids, how you doing, like this, or maybe a Calusa ventriloquist, I don't know. Or they could have put it on a big long wooden neck and had strings coming down, put on a person's arms, go like this, and the mouth goes like that. You could chase the kids around or something, okay? But fun stuff. This is fun stuff. Also, the Key Marco cat. Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. Those of you who hadn't, it's a figurine about this tall, carved in wood. And it is, you can look at it and you say, I know exactly what species that is. It's a Florida panther. You can tell exactly what that is. And he's sitting there like this, like, cats are always, when they sit, their paws are just like that, just exactly what this thing does. But you pick it up and you look at it, the top part is a panther. The bottom part is a human being. So he's got human legs down below and a panther body, which is pretty neat. And I don't know why that, what it means, but it's there. They're also great painters. We have paintings of birds, we have paintings of alligators, we have paintings of people. So these guys were artistic. Well, so are we. I mean, don't have to be artistic, but we appreciate art. What did they do with their art? They would hang it on their walls because it's pretty. We all do this, right? I mean, everybody's got stuff hanging on their walls at home. And so that's what these people did. They loved art. They loved music. But here's an interesting thing. Art and music are not necessary for Calusa survival. It's not necessary for ours either. We just do it because we like it. Okay? They're like us because they do things not to get by. They do these things to make life more fun. Right? So go to the next sign over here. Okay, among the things that the Calusa also carved were these really neat masks. And they would hang those on the walls, again, because it's really nice art. The Spanish didn't like them. They said each one was worse than the other, but, I like them a lot. Another thing that the Calusa really liked was jewelry. They loved jewelry. The Spanish talk about it, and we found a lot of it. Okay? They made some of their own jewelry, and they got jewelry from Spanish shipwrecks. Well, we have jewelry too. I think everybody here has probably at least one piece of jewelry, okay? And we don't need that. We do it because we like it. I got my ear pierced in May of 1974, right after I graduated from college. And I've had this earring, not the same one, but because I like it. It's there, right? They also painted themselves. They loved the body art. We don't think they tattooed, there's no reference to tattooing, but the Spanish talk about how they painted almost every day. What does that have to do with us? Well, cosmetics, $1 billion industry. And some of us don't wear makeup, but some of us got tattoos, right? So it's body art. We like this stuff. For paint, the Calusa used the sap of a strangler fig, which is latex. They made latex paint. And they would color it with local things such as blush berries. But they also, we found in that mound during Year of the Indian 2, ochre, which is iron oxide. Okay? And that's, you find it in, in the earth, and it's different colors of shades of orange and red, right? And they put that in the paint to give it color, because you don't want all of your makeup to be the same. We also found in that mound during Year of the Indian 2, galena, which is lead ore. They would take that and crush it up and put it in the paint, made the paint sparkle, like we have glitter cosmetics. See, this is a lot like us. But remember, it's not what you find, it's what you find out. We're finding this stuff, but what are we finding out? Well, yes, they like makeup or painting, and they like different colors, and they like glitter, but ochre does not occur in Florida, any place. The ochre that we found came from Georgia, 300 miles away. Galena does not occur here in Florida. The galena we found came from southeast Missouri. Okay, that's 1,000 miles away. Okay. Ooh, we're starting to find things out about the Calusa. Okay. Also during Year of the Indian 2, you're scraping away in your pit, and you're looking for the big ticket items, artifacts and stone cutting tools and things like that, right? And then you're scraping all this stuff up, and you put it in your little dustpan, you put it in a bucket, and then they take the bucket and they put it in a screen, somebody goes through that. Well, during Year of the Indian 2, we found chili pepper seeds and papaya seeds. All right? That's great. Well, chili peppers and papayas don't occur naturally in Florida. Okay? These are the only chili pepper seeds ever found in an archaeological context east of the Mississippi River. The only papaya seeds ever found in an archaeological context in North America. What are we finding out? What does this tell us? We're finding these things, they're trade. They trade. Exactly. They're a part of this huge trading network. They're getting, galena from Missouri. They're getting chili peppers from New Mexico or someplace. Okay? They're getting papayas from Cuba or wherever. Okay? They're part of this huge trading network. But here's the thing about all these things we're talking about, the ochre, the galena, the chili peppers, the papayas, none of that stuff is necessary. They don't need these things. They get these things because they make life more fun. Even to the point of glitter stuff for their paint. But also papayas. They got enough food around here. They don't need papayas and chili peppers and things like that. They're doing what we do. We buy stuff that we don't really need. We just do it because this makes life more fun. It's like you're a Calusa and you've got this big pot full of, oyster stew or clam chowder or something. There's all kinds of seafood in there. And you taste it and you say, boy, I wish I had something to make this a little spicier. Oh, I know, I got chili peppers. I'm gonna throw some of those in there. And you get done and you say, boy, what do we got for dessert? Oh, the papayas are ready, okay? They don't need that stuff. I was in Publix yesterday and out there in the front, they got a bin and Pepperidge Farm cookies were BOGO. I didn't need those. But I got them, all right, because I really like them. Makes life more fun. Exactly. So anyway, huge trading network. What did the Calusa use as trade? Okay, if they're trading close around, say Miami Indians in the middle of the state, the guy shows up and says, hey, I got 10 deer pelts. What do you got? Well, I got 20 pounds of smoked mullet. Sure, great trade, okay? But suppose somebody shows up down here with, I got 5 pounds of galena. What do you got? Oh, I'll give you 10 pounds of mullet. No, because I'll eat that before I get back to, up there. I want something that I can take and trade so it'll, get more trade down this way. They had one thing that they traded that was the most important thing that they had, which is this, okay? Lightning whelk, right. Lightning whelks only occur around the Gulf Coast and up the east coast of South Carolina. But we have found lightning whelks, whole lightning whelks, or parts of lightning whelks, tools made from lightning whelks, all up the Mississippi Valley. We've found them in Oklahoma and Illinois and in North Dakota and in Canada. Why? We don't find these other shells. We don't find, this is a tulip, right? Tulip shell. We don't find these. We don't find any other kinds of shell in those archaeological contexts. Only this one. Why? Well, here's why. you got two main kinds of shelled mollusks. You got bivalves, which are your clams, oysters, two-part mollusks. Then you got these one-part mollusks, okay, called gastropods. Worldwide, there's 70 to 80,000 species. Okay. Worldwide, 96, 97% of those, and all of them, except for the lightning whelk, opens on the right side. Lightning whelk opens on the left side. Isn't that cool? You know, locals, old timers around in Florida will call this a left-handed whelk, not a lightning whelk. The point of that is, it's not the left-handedness, okay? It's the spire, this part right here. On a right-handed gastropod, the spire goes counterclockwise. Left-handed, it goes clockwise. And that's important because a lot of indigenous people thought that the sun would rise, cross the sky, and set and rise again in a clockwise path. So you've got sunrise, and you've got daytime, sunset, sunrise, daytime, sunset, life, birth, life, death, rebirth. Look out. All right.
Morning, y'all.
So this shell becomes this mystical piece representing life and death. A lot of indigenous dances, especially funeral dances, go in a clockwise spiral like that. And the burial mounds, when Cushing was here, the burial mounds were still intact, and he found that they had, sorry about that, folks. He found that they had paths from the bottom to the top, and they were clockwise path. That's why this particular shell is so important. So what do you do with these? Well, you make tools, for one thing. Okay, this is a lightning whelk. This is an actual Calusa tool. All right. And I gotta tell everybody when I bring these out that this was not found in an archaeological context. Okay, I found this in a vacant lot. My mom used to live 4 miles down that way on a shell road, and as we said, people came out here in the early 20th century, started tearing down these mounds and making roads out of them, and my mom lived on one of those roads, and the vacant lot next door had this in it. When I was over there one day and I took it in to the archaeologists, and they said, yes, this is a type A cutting tool. And what you did when you found one of these really robust lightning whelks, first thing you do is punch a hole right there. And we have dozens of these, maybe hundreds of them, and they're all the same. Okay, and then you punch a hole right there, and you cut a notch right there, and then you can see, if you line it up, the notch in the hole line up directly right next to what's known as the columella, okay? And you can see right through there. Then you take a big heavy stick, run it through there, lash it down with deer tendon, sharpen this side, and that's how you clear the land. That's how you cut a tree down. Okay? That's how you dig out a canoe. Seriously, okay? Another important tool for the Calusa, and again, I found this out in Pine Island Sound. It wasn't from an archaeological site. The official name of this is just a vessel. It's a drinking cup, all right? And if you notice this, it's got a hole right there. And you notice it's pretty darn symmetrical. This hole didn't just get there because it was rolling on in Pine Island Sound, okay? It got there because, okay, let's say I'm a Calusa, and this is mine. Okay? Nobody drinks out of this except me. When I die, y'all are my family. You don't want anybody else drinking out of it, so you punch a hole in it, okay? That's what's known as ritually killing the vessel. And indigenous people all through North and Central and South America do that, okay? A lot of other people, made their drinking cups, their vessels out of clay. And so they would punch a hole. A lot of times it's just a round hole, okay? And sometimes they break the whole thing. And some indigenous people, we don't know about the Calusa because the Spanish didn't tell us, but for some indigenous people, the vessel itself has a spirit. So if you punch a hole in it, the spirit gets away and goes with the dead person to the afterlife. We don't know if the Calusa did that or not. One other thing that you can do with lightning whelks is make art. Because remember, art is important. And if you look at this here. Take a look at that. Okay, this is a lightning whelk. And you can see that what they've done is they've cut off the sharp bottom of it, okay, and they've carved it. This is what's called a falcon warrior, okay, and it depicts a person wearing a feather cloak. And up here's his head, he's got a mask of a falcon on there, and he's saying something, all right? But you can see he's got feathers and all that. Isn't that cool?
That is cool.
Lightning whelk. Okay. But here's what's really neat about it. Archaeologists found this at the Spiro Mound Complex in eastern Oklahoma. They didn't find it here where these guys live, where these whelks live. They found it in Oklahoma. So somehow this made it up there, and either they carved it up there, somebody carved it here, somebody carved it along the way. But this is from the Gulf Coast probably, and ended up in Oklahoma. So this is a very important.
Would that have been a trade item?
Had to be a trade item. And here's another thing, I'm just gonna throw this out there. I don't know if I did this last time you were here. It's not as if the Calusa said, oh, we're out of glitter stuff. Let's paddle up the Missouri, go up the Mississippi and get some. What probably happened was somebody up there loaded up a canoe with galena and paddled down to where maybe Memphis is and traded that to somebody there. And then they kept some of that and they took some more and they went down to maybe where Vicksburg is and then went down to maybe where New Orleans is and then on down to here. Okay. So that's how these things get around. Okay. So anyhow, the Calusa diet. This city, all these mounds made out of shell, whole city, big mounds. Mound Key, Kalos, the capital, 125 acres. It's an island made completely of shells. And a whole bunch of shells, mountains, islands out in Pine Island Sound and other places like Hemp Key and Jocelyn and Galt Island, places like that, made by the Calusa out of shells. So what do you suppose their number one source of protein was? Mollusk, right?
Yeah.
Right, shellfish. No, that's not right. Okay. Up until Year of the Indian 2, we thought that's what was the case. Obviously, tons of mollusks. You're digging away, like I said, and you're scraping away, and you're getting all this stuff, and you're putting it in your bucket, and they go through it. And so these people sit down with all this stuff. There are a lot of fish bones in there. And they identified all these fish, and they determined that 70 to 80% of the Calusa's protein came from fin fish, not shellfish. So you gotta think that's a whole lot of fish, because you got, see those mounds there? But 70 to 80% was fin fish, 50 species, and it's all the stuff we still eat. Snook and redfish and sea trout and sheephead, a lot of sharks and a lot of stingrays, and a whole lot of mullet, okay? But it was shellfish. It was fin fish. Also shellfish and other protein with stuff like alligators, birds, sea turtles, a lot of sea turtles, but fin fish is where it was at for these folks. You can't just live on protein, so they ate various kinds of berries. Strangler figs have figs. There's a plant called arrowroot, also known as kunti. The root of that can be made into bread. They still call it Seminole bread, so you have starch. So you got this really well-rounded diet, but it's fish that made these people go. Okay, so go back to that sign for a second. The Calusa are what archaeologists call a complex society, and there's three things that make up complex society. First, it's you stay in one place. You're not nomadic. So the Sioux and the Comanche and the Cheyenne, they followed the buffalo around the plains. They were nomadic. They're not a complex society. But complex does not mean better than or smarter than or more sophisticated than. That's just the word we use to describe these societies that have these three particular criteria. The second thing is it's a class structure, a very strict class structure. Okay? You start with this person right here. He's the cacique. All through the Caribbean and through Florida, the paramount chief from each group of people is called the cacique. Start with him. Then you've got a class of nobles, you've got a class of warriors, a class of priests, and the rest of us, the people who do the work. If you're born in one class, you stay in that class. There's no rising from being a fisherman to being cacique. Right? Plus, if you are in one class, you don't do the things that the other class does. If you're a fisherman, you don't fight in wars. Okay? When the Calusa attacked Juan Ponce de Leon, it was all warriors. There weren't any fishermen involved. Okay? And if you're a warrior, you don't go out fishing. And that's one of the big differences between these complex societies and people like the Cheyenne and the Sioux. If you are a warrior, you're also going to hunt buffalo. Okay? And even the priests, the medicine men, would fight and hunt buffalo. There's more egalitarian than these societies. The third thing is you build. You build cities. You're going to stay in one place. You don't want to just live in tents, so you build cities. Other pre-Columbian cultures were, like the Cahokia in Illinois, you got the Anasazi out west in central Mexico and Central and South America. You had the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas, right? And then a whole bunch of different other ones. The difference between all of those and the Calusa is that those other societies were based on agriculture. They grew these vast fields of corn and squash and beans and potatoes and yams. And that's important. If you want to stay in one place, you want to build cities and have what we call a sedentary society, you've got to feed them. And the easiest way to feed them is to grow a bunch of food. The Calusa didn't do that. The Calusa, the Spanish tell us, had small garden plots where they grew papayas and chili peppers and things like that, but they didn't have agriculture. How can they stay in one place if you don't have stuff out in the fields to bring in? Anybody want to guess? Not true. Fish, yes. These estuaries out here are so productive. And I just want to make sure, again, because before I moved to Florida, I did not know what an estuary was. I knew it had something to do with water. I just want to make sure everybody really knows what an estuary is. Very simple. It's a body of water where fresh water from the land mixes with salt water from the sea. And estuaries worldwide are among the most productive ecosystems anywhere. They had fish out here. They had mollusks out here to eat. Okay? That is how they were able to survive without being farmers. All right? The Spanish called the Calusa a race of giants. And you mentioned the size of these guys, right? And the thing is, the Spanish, they didn't mean that they were 7 foot tall. This isn't Shaquille O'Neal. Okay? But they were 5'8", 5'10", with some 6-footers thrown in there. But the Spanish were little. Juan Ponce de Leon was 4 feet 11. So you've got all these, right around 5 foot Spaniards, and you got 5'8", 5'10", 6-foot tall people. The women were taller than the Spanish men. Okay? How do you reckon they got so big? That's right. That's right. Anybody remember one of the great lines in Silence of the Lambs? Remember that? The first time Clarice meets Hannibal Lecter, and he's giving her guff about being from West Virginia, and he says that good nutrition has given you some length of bone. Well, these guys got good nutrition. They got some length of bone. Right? My first year here, doing these tours, I had a class of 5th graders, and that's a tough audience, a really tough audience. And so I'm at this sign, and they're not paying any attention. They're just, they're looking up at the sky, and they're, elbowing each other and all that, except for one guy, standing right where you are. And he was looking at this sign. So I'm talking away, and I'm looking at him, and he's looking at the sign. And I used to teach high school English, and that can be a tough audience too. And so every day I'd come in and think, oh my God, if I can get one kid to realize that, subject-verb agreement is important in your life. And this happened to be my kid. I knew this was going to be my kid, so I started talking to him. And I get finished, and I say, any questions? And he raises his hand. And I said, okay, this is the turning point of my tour. He is going to ask a great question. Those kids are going to say, oh, Billy, he's into this. Let's all get into it. I said, okay, yeah, what's your question? He says, man, that dude is ripped. And they were. The Spanish tell us they were powerfully muscular. How'd they get so strong? How'd they make a living? Okay, you guys are all paddlers, right? Yep. Okay, paddle kayaks? How much does your kayak weigh?
Depends, 85, 80
Yeah,
pounds.
my fishing
some of them
kayak's
can be-
80 pounds.
Okay, and what's it made out of?
Plastic HDPE.
There you go. These guys were paddling tree trunks,
Yeah.
cypress tree trunks that they dug out. That'll put some muscle on you. Plus, they were throwing cast nets to make a living. You throwing a cast net, you throw that thing, and you gotta haul it in. And they're also pulling gill nets. Okay, just pulling those gill nets in by hand. That's gonna build you up. That's gonna make you ripped. So, tremendous diet and a lot of really good exercise made these people, callous, fierce people.
I mean, I know something, but you never know if it's the correct reason.
Alrighty, somewhere along 1000 AD, the Calusa had been here for 500 years. They've been building mounds for a couple hundred years. And they decided, well, let's dig a canal across the island. All right? And so why would you want to do that? They dug it from here at Pine Island Sound across to Matlacha Pass, 2.5 miles. Why? Well, to get to the other side, obviously. But why would you want to go over there? Remember, these people are traders, and they got tribute coming in. The main drag in Florida, the Alligator Alley would have been Caloosahatchee River. So people coming down here from the other part of the state, coming up to here, or these guys going up the river, cut a canal in there, that's gonna cut 10 miles off your trip. And you guys are all paddlers. If you can cut off 10 miles, that's a good thing. And the same thing around that way too. And another thing is the prevailing winds around here, as you probably all know, are from the northeast. Which is fine, because if you live on this side of the island, you're in the lee. But, as you all also know, from time to time we get winds you can't be paddling around in, okay? Before a front gets here, the wind switches around out of the south for a day or two. And it can blow 15, 20, 25 knots. And then when the front gets here, it'll blow 15, 25, 30, maybe even 40 knots. Maybe 2 or 3 days. And you can't go out and fish in that. Well, you gotta feed the people, so what do? Well, you could get in the canal and go over here and fish this area and be in the lee. So that's another purpose for this thing. This is what's left of the canal. When Cushing was here, it was pretty much intact, but it just kind of got filled in over the years. 2 archaeologists, George Lure and Ryan Wheeler, did this really great work on this. They surveyed the whole thing all the way across the island, and they determined that it was 18 to 28 feet wide, depending on where you were, and 3 to 5 feet deep, depending on where you were on the canal. The scientists took those numbers and did some math and decided if you took all the dirt that the Calusa dug out of this thing to make the canal, and you stacked it up on a football field, and you squared it off nice and neat, it would be a stack of dirt 300 feet by 150 feet by 25 feet. It's a lot of dirt you're digging out, okay? But not only that, they had to clear the land. This would have been a slash pine forest. This is Pine Island, right? So slash pine out there, slash pine, palmettos, gumbo limbos, cabbage trees. They had to cut all that stuff down to make this path. And then they had to pull the stumps up. This was hard work. These guys really had to work hard to do it. But the labor involved is not the most impressive thing. The impressive thing is the engineering. Because Pine Island is not flat, right? It's sea level here and over here in Matlacha Pass. But right down the middle, there's a ridge, 12 feet. Okay? That's where you go when the hurricanes are coming. We evacuated from my house right down here to the middle of the island, and my house got 2 feet of water, got nothing up there. Okay, it's higher. And so what are you gonna do? You can't cut through that. The Calusa did what we do. Remember, the Calusa are like us. They looked at this problem and they did the math. They surveyed it, said, we got it figured out. This is how you do it. Sea level, 12 feet. But it's not nice rise like that and a nice bell curve like that to the other side. What you have is right here, you start at sea level, it goes 300 yards flat, and then you get a little rise. And it goes 400 yards, and another rise, 600 yards all the way across to the top of the island, and then it goes like that. It's like steps. What the Calusa did, this is where the smarts come in. We don't know where they started. They might have started in the middle, but I'm going to say they started right here just to make it easy. They start right here, and they dig down below the mean low water mark. So water's going to be coming in, you know, even at low tides. And they dig, they get to this first rise, and they put a control structure. And the water comes in, it stops right there. And then they dig this section, 400 yards. Okay? And they get to the next rise, and they put a structure there. But wait a minute. Every plumber will tell you two things: payday's on Friday, and water doesn't go uphill, right? This water from Pine Island Sound is not going to be up in here. Where'd this water come from? This is where the Calusa got smart. Florida's a wet place. You start digging a hole, you're going to get water pretty quick, okay? The Calusa realized if we dig down far enough, we're going to hit something hard. We call it the hard pan. And it can be clay, or it can be compacted organic material that water does not seep down through. Hydrologically, term is aquiclude. It's an aquiclude. So what they did is they dug down to the hard pan in each section. The water comes in from the side, and that's what fills this up. That's pretty smart. And of course, it's going to take maintenance. Got to be maintained. And you know, the artist put these logs in here. We think that might have been what they did, and they might have put logs all along in there to help to keep it from caving in. But this was a pretty brilliant thing. Also, when Cushing was here, this berm was still here. What this was for, and again, being smart, here in Florida we have what's known as sheet flow. Sheet flow is when you get a lot of rain in the summertime and the water won't take anymore, so it just stacks up and then it just flows down to the water down here. You don't want that happening and rolling over here to erode the sides of your canal, so they put this berm there. Okay. And another thing that they did, okay, remember these water features? Okay, if you look at these, notice something. Coming off the canal, each one has what we call lateral canals that had gates on them. What would happen is, in the summertime, you get all this rain coming in here. If you guys have been here in the summer, you get tons of rain in the afternoon. That water's gonna come roaring down here and tear up the sides of your canal. But what they did, and they did the same thing on the other side as well, you get all this water coming down, they open the gates, goes in there and fills up these water features, slows the water down. Plus it fills up the water features so you'll actually have water in there. Smart guys. The first person to ever write about this canal was a guy named Charles Kenworthy. He's a physician from New York. And he roamed around Florida writing stories for outdoor magazines. And he had a very interesting pen name. He called himself Al Fresco. Get it? But he got out here and he writes about this canal. And he says, man, this is a brilliant thing. It's an engineering masterpiece. But he said, the Calusa didn't do it. Because, he said, the Calusa were too indolent, too lazy. Why did he say that? Because that's what the Spanish said. The Spanish came back, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Spanish come back here, and they write about the Calusa, calling them Indios Indolentes, lazy Indians, because they weren't farmers. All these guys want to do is fish. That ain't working. No, you got to farm the land. If you don't farm, you're lazy. That's why Kenworthy called the Calusa indolent. He also said that the Calusa didn't do this because the engineering required a higher degree of intellect than the Calusa had. Now, if that is not a Eurocentric attitude, Charles Blanchard, the guy who called me back in 1992, had this expression, the dumb Indian attitude. We get this feeling, oh, these are just dumb Indians. You know, what do they know? They pile some shells up and make a mound, but they're stupid. No, these were smart people. They survived here for 1,200 years. They did all right, okay? So, that's the canal. Here is another thing that we can do or not. If we wanted to, we could walk around there and up on Randell Mound for the best view in South Florida, or we can go back that way. And And we can finish up there. Yep. Okay, yep, all righty. Enthusiastic.
What is that over there?
Well,
That
yeah.
area.
That's Upper Captiva.
Oh.
North Cap.
Yeah, that nest right up there. Okay, to close out our story today, we're going to talk about Calusa politics and Calusa religion. Okay, politics and religion are why there are no Calusa at all. Remember, the Spanish didn't come back for 45 years after the Calusa killed Juan Ponce de Leon. And when they did, they were led by Pedro Menendez de Avilés. He was the adelantado, the governor, military governor of Florida. He shows up in 1566 at Mound Key, Calos, the capital, and he tells the cacique, whose name was also Calos, he wants to build a fort and a mission at the capital. He wants to convert all the Calusa to Christianity. So they've gone beyond the point of simply murdering indigenous people to trying to convert them. So Calos says, sure, why not? Now this is a strange thing because the Calusa hate the Spanish. But Calos was thinking, I can use these Spanish with their really advanced weapons in the ongoing wars they were having with the Tocobaga, who lived north of Tampa Bay, the other Tampa Bay. So the Spanish build a fort, they build a mission, they start trying to convert the Calusa. And Calos says, okay, now let's go kill all the Tocobaga. And Menendez says, no, we're not going to do that. I didn't come here to fight wars. In fact, I want you to make peace with the Tocobaga. That made Calos mad. You fight the Tocobaga. That's what the Calusa do. That's part of their tradition. You don't tell them not to fight these people. That's what we do. It's like Florida and Florida State. You can't tell them not to do it. So Calos started plotting to kill all the Spaniards. Unfortunately for Calos, there's another high-ranking Calusa. The Spanish called him Don Felipe. He wanted to be the cacique. He told Menendez that if you kill Calos and his two top aides, and make me cacique, I'll become a Christian. I'll make sure everybody else becomes a Christian. Menendez, sure, that's a great deal. Kill these guys, everybody becomes Christian, doing our jobs. So Menendez invites Calos and his two top people into the fort, and they chop their heads off. They make Don Felipe the cacique, and Don Felipe turns around and does not become a Christian. All right? This is another way that the Calusa are like us, politically. This is a campaign promise. That's all it was. You make me cacique, I'll do this. Had no intention to do it. So a lot of things happened over the next year and a half, and I won't get into them, but Menendez just gets tired of Don Felipe not becoming a Christian, so they kill him. That made all the Calusa mad on Mound Key down at Calos, so they burned down all their houses, and they just left. They got in their canoes, they paddled away, some of them probably came down here, and Spanish were left there with nothing to do, nobody to convert, so they went back to Cuba. And then the Calusa came back to Mound Key, and they just lived happily ever after for the next 128 years when the next bunch of Spanish showed up. But when they got back to Cuba, the head priest, Juan Rojel, wrote all this stuff up, and he told us about the Calusa religion. And this is important. Okay. The Calusa have three gods. You had universal God, guy who makes the sun go up and sun go down, tides go in, tides go out. You had a kind of vague political God, the god of empires, then you have a war god. Also, each Calusa has three souls. One soul is in the pupil of your eye, one soul is in your shadow, And one soul is in your reflection in a calm body of water. When a Calusa dies, the eye soul stays with the body and is buried. The other two souls leave the body and they enter a large animal. When that animal dies, the soul goes into a smaller animal, and then a smaller animal and a smaller animal. That's their religion. That's the religion they want. Juan Rojel, the priest, said that they had believed in their religion from the beginning of time. And he wrote, they did not want to listen to me. They just wanted to be left alone. That's all the Calusa wanted, is to be left alone so they can fish out here and get by and eat papayas and trade for things. The Calusa wanted nothing to do with Spanish religion or anything else. And they also didn't want anybody else to. Okay? The Calusa practiced what John Worth calls, he's an archaeologist, calls resistance and isolationism. Just keep them away. Keep them out of all of South Florida. And in fact, in 1567, the Calusa heard that people down in the Keys called the Tetesta were trading with the Spanish. So a bunch of them, we don't know how many, got in canoes and paddled all the way to the Keys. Think about that. You're a paddler. Paddled to the Keys, and they assassinated the cacique of the Tetesta. And they said, don't trade with these people. Then in 1614, the Calusa heard that people up around Tampa Bay, the other Tampa Bay called the Mocoso, they were trading with the Spanish. This time, a fleet of 300 canoes. And we don't know how many people were each canoe, but maybe sent maybe 1,000 people up there, 1,000 warriors. They attacked 2 Mocoso settlements and they killed 500 people just for trading with the Spanish. The ones they left alive, they told to walk from Tampa Bay to St. Augustine, the Spanish capital of Florida. Tell the Spanish governor of Florida, the Calusa did this. Stay away, all right? So this is the way it was. We just don't want these guys around. The next people to show up were priests in 1697. And again, they just showed up. We got to convert these people. We can't leave them alone. And this time, though, they brought farm tools. Remember, these are indios indolentes, lazy Indians. We got to teach them to till the land. This is what the priest said. We must teach them to till the land and make them rational people. So they bring these farm tools, and the Calusa look at them. By this time, the Calusa had heard through the trading network about the African slave trading up in the colonies, and they could still speak Spanish. So they looked at these tools, and they said to the Spanish, that's great. Where's the slaves to use them? What they were saying is, we don't make a living digging in the dirt. We make a living catching fish out here in these estuaries, so just back off. So these priests, after about 2 months, the Calusa just threw these guys out. Just get out of here, okay? So this isolationism is a very important thing. And I'm getting into one little kind of gray area because you're gonna read a lot of places, including academic books and articles, that by 1600, the Calusa population had crashed from 20,000 to 2,000, 90%, due to European diseases.
Right.
Okay, right. But there's another school that I'm in that says, no, because this isolationism kept them from getting the diseases as bad as all these other indigenous people. Okay? So they were still a powerful, robust population up until the 1700s. Right? Whichever school you're in, we do know that the beginning of the end for the Calusa was 1704. Okay. The English, the British, had taken the control of North Florida away from the Spanish. And to do that, they enlisted the aid of Creek and Yamasee Indians from Georgia and South Carolina. They gave them muskets to fight this war. When the war was over, now we're in charge of North Florida, they said to the Creeks and Yamasees, take your muskets, go on down to South Florida and start rounding up Indians. We need slaves. Got to have slaves for the colonies. So over the next 7 years, the Creeks and Yamasees took back an estimated 10,000 South Florida Indians. That's Calusa, Ayas, Miamis, everybody. All right? And that doesn't count how many they killed, because you know that Creeks and Yamasees show up here and say, hey, come on, let's go to Georgia. Want you to be slaves? The Calusa are going to fight them. But these guys got muskets. You've heard the expression, never take a knife to a gunfight? That's what these people did. They had bows and arrows. These other guys had muskets. So the raids got so bad that everybody in South Florida moved to the Keys. The Calusa abandoned Tampa, our Tampa, in 1710. And you got to wonder about the psychological effect. These people have been here forever. You know, we talk, people around here, well, I'm a fourth generation Floridian. I'm not, but people, you know, people like the Darnas and the Dooleys, you know, fourth generation. Yeah, that's like 100 years. The Calusa were here for 1,200 years, 40 generations. That's all they knew. And they had to pack up and go to the Keys because of the Creeks and Yamasees. So everybody's down in the Keys. Big irony, then, is the Calusa, with their indomitable spirit, they didn't want to, you know, mess with the Spanish. They didn't want to become Christians. If they had buddied up with the Spanish, if they had traded with the Spanish, they could have gotten guns themselves. And for 100 years, the Spanish had a string of forts in North Florida, and they converted those Indians. And they protected those Indians from people like the Creeks and Yamasees. If the Calusa had simply converted and become, you know, mission Indians, the way the North Indians were, the Spanish might have still been here. They could build a fort right here. And the Creeks and Yamasees come down, no, you're not going to take us. We got guns, we got a fort, we got Spanish to help us. And another really big irony is, you remember how the Taino left Cuba and came to Florida to get away from the evil Spanish? 1711, all these people down in the Keys, these South Florida Indians, asked the Spanish to take them to Cuba to get away from evil Creek and Yamasee Indians. So in 1711, 270 South Florida Indians, including 50 Calusa, including the cacique and his son, got on 2 ships. They went to Cuba, where within 3 months, 200 of them had died from the diseases they didn't get up here. Which is one reason I'm thinking, you know, they didn't get wiped out by disease up here because they died when they went down there, all right? But there were still Calusa up here. In 1743, more priests come up. We've got to convert these people. They find a bunch of Calusa at the mouth of the Miami River. And these are no longer these great race of giants, ripped people. They become kind of drunks, right? The head priest, a guy named Alenia, said that they had this incredible passion for rum. The first thing that the Calusa said when the priests got there was, "Did you bring rum?" And the priest said, "No, we didn't bring rum. Rum is evil. Rum is bad for you." And he said that they had the audacity to say to us, "You use wine in your ceremonies, give us rum, and we'll use that in our ceremonies." And we said, "You're not getting any rum?" They said, "Then we're not being Christian." That's it. Alenia writes that the Calusa men would drink rum until they burst. Not sure what that means, but it's unpleasant sounding. He also writes that the head Calusa priest would drink rum many times until he passes out. And what we think is what he's doing, he's the holy man and he's drinking rum, trying to get inspiration, trying to get visions, to answer the question, this big question, what happened to us, you know? Then these priests, you know, they're just, you tell by the way Alenia writes that they think that the Calusa are just some kind of really lower life people. And Alenia writes with just tremendous disgust about seeing a group of Calusa praying to a carved wooden fish. And I think this is neat, because after all they've been through, all right, the raids and being separated from their family, having to leave their homes, and also this is the first time, Alenia is writing for the first time about Calusa getting smallpox, getting diseases. So now they're getting diseases. After all of this, they still got their own religion. That's pretty neat. Alenia didn't think it was pretty neat. He thought it was idolatry. And he wrote, and this is from Hans' translation, he writes, "Their idolatries will be abolished, and the true religion established in this people, despite the obstinate ones who, through punishment, shall come to understand those things they could not grasp through reason." In other words, if we can't talk them into being Christians, we're going to beat it into them. But he ultimately says, I can't do anything with these people. I cannot change them. They're indomitable. They're ferocious. They're warlike. You know, I can't do anything with them. So they leave. But then 20 years later in 1763, the last known 80 Calusa families, we don't know how many that is, maybe a couple hundred people, got on 2 ships and went to Cuba. Okay? And that is when the Calusa just disappeared from the historical record. We don't know what happened to those people. They might have gone down there and all died from diseases just like that. Or there might be DNA down there. They might have married in with other groups down there. They might have married in, I can imagine this, some of the Spanish might have come down, you know, they would talk about how attractive the women were, so the Spanish might come down and say, hey, you know, beautiful Calusa woman, you want to come live in the big house? So there might be DNA down there. There might be DNA, Calusa DNA up here in Florida, because it's pretty much consensus that not all of the Calusa left and went to Cuba. You know, there's a lot of going back and forth and people bringing back, so like, don't go down there, it's not healthy. People are dying. So some of these Calusa probably stayed here, just kind of melted into the countryside. And then when the Seminole come down in the late 18th century, the Calusa say, welcome to South Florida. Can we marry in with you? We'll teach you how to fish. And so DNA there. The Seminoles actually have an old saying. If you see a tall Seminole, it's probably a Calusa. But the culture itself, there's no one single Calusa left. The whole culture is gone. This great, you know, artistic warrior fishing culture is completely gone. Chuck Blanchard, the archaeologist who called me back in 1992, wrote a book called New Words, Old Songs. It's all about the rise, decline, and fall of the Calusa. And the last sentence of that book sums up what we're talking about right here. Blanchard writes, the last of the traditional Calusa appear to have ended their lives as fugitives, slaves, or displaced persons, dying in many cases without nation or tribe or family, their hearts embittered, their minds befuddled by rum and unspeakable loneliness. That's it. They're gone. 250 years after first contact, the Calusa were completely gone. They were victims of other indigenous people. They were victims, to one degree or another, of disease. They were victims of rum. But as much as anything, they were victims of their own indomitable spirit and their refusal to abandon their liberty to the discretion and foreign will of other men, all right? But that might not be the end. Okay, remember, 2 Calusa souls leave the body, enter a large animal, and then a smaller animal, a smaller animal. Okay, could be that the souls of some Calusa who were born here at Tampa, lived here and died here, have worked their way down, and they're ospreys, or bald eagles, or pelicans, and they're still making a living catching the fish out here in Pine Island Sound. Okay, that's it.
There's one right there.
There you go.
Thank you.
See,
Ah, that's awesome.
You don't want to feed the baby. She's
That's
been
awesome.
sitting
there you
there.
go.
Sitting there. That's why
You
they've been
couldn't have
screaming.
timed that any better.
I planned it. That's my buddy.
You got the memo.
I got the memo. So that's it. Any questions? Thanks for coming out, y'all. Yes.
So, do they have the Calusa DNA?
No.
They didn't name that's kind of
We don't have any DNA. We found some bones, but the DNA is so degraded.
Yeah.
The soil that they found it in is just, you know, it just eats up the DNA, so we just don't have anything to go by. Plus, you know, you might be able to find some in the burial mounds, but you don't dig in burial mounds anymore. It's just not done. Okay. So, anything else? Okay.
What's across? What's the city that we see or whatever?
That's North Cap, Upper Captiva.
And then is that like just a mangrove?
You got mangroves. You got this is Black Island. That's Wood Key. That's Rat Key over there. Rat Key is an actual mound, or you know, made by the Calusa. And if you go around there, it's Part Island. That's also a Calusa site. There's a whole bunch of Calusa sites out here that the Calusa just say, hey, let's build an island right here, and that's what they did. So there have been a Calusa all over this place, not just here. And it must have been just, to me, you know, think about all these islands. Not all of them, but a lot of these islands were Calusa settlements. And so you're here, you get done your day fishing, and you're up here on your mound, and you can see, you know, cooking fires at other mounds, other islands out there. And say, okay, I need to go talk to Joe. I traded him some stuff that I haven't gotten, you know, I traded him a bunch of mullet last week, but he's gonna give me some shark's teeth, but, you know, I need to go talk to him about that, you know. So, anyway. All righty, we'll go back down that way and You guys can go have some lunch.
I find it ironic that a group of men that require slaves to survive